All right, guys. So we are now out of the realm of branches of government, and we're now into federal versus state power. This is collectively called the Federalism, I guess, unit, and it's very short. It's only about 3 days worth of material at most. And for today, basically, federalism, we need to distinguish it from other words like federalist, federalism in the constitutional meaning. And basically, for this portion of this class, federalism refers to the relationship between national power and state power and how our Constitution sets it up. So, a little historical background. Remember, back during the Articles of Confederation, the states had all the power. It was not a federal government. The national government was basically non-existent as far as its ability to control and regulate anything. Enter the Constitution. To fix all those issues, we introduce a federal system of government where essentially the national government would be supreme, but would share a great deal of powers with the state governments as well. So, first we need to know about enumerated powers, and this is a bit of a review. Enumerated powers are those specifically given to the federal government, so we call them enumerated, expressed, delegated. This is stuff that goes right to the federal government. These powers are exclusive to the federal government, so no one else has these powers. It's just the national government. So you'll hear me use that phrase interchangeably, national, federal. It's the same thing in this context. Don't get confused with the context of federalists or federalism in the constitutional convention sense. We sometimes, and here's just the synonyms, we call them express powers, delegated powers. Just know on the exam you might see any number of these options for synonyms, so make sure you know them all. Make sure you know enumerated equals delegated, which equals expressed. Also sometimes called written powers. All right, so Article 1, Section 8 lists out 17 enumerated, expressed, and / delegated powers for Congress. First things first, they can regulate trade among the states. They can conduct foreign affairs. By they, I'm talking about the national government. They raise and support an army, coin money, establish postal systems, govern territories, regulate immigration, pass all laws necessary and proper. So you got the necessary and proper elastic clause in there as well. And it gives government, this gives the government implied powers. So don't get confused. The necessary and proper clause is a enumerated power that creates the basis for implied powers. So it's still written in there. All right, this is the stuff we have not gone over yet. These are reserved powers. Reserved powers means they're reserved to the states and the local governments, and then respectively down to the people themselves. So here's the states' exclusive area where they just have power. They can regulate trade and commerce within their state. So this is where you get in the whole idea of well, the feds are in charge of regulating if it goes across the border lines from North Carolina to South Carolina, but in North Carolina we can say, well, this item is illegal to sell. In our case, fireworks. So guess what? You go to south of the border in South Carolina, you start seeing all these fireworks shops pop up. People are buying fireworks down there. South Carolina has said, according to their commerce laws, fireworks are cool. North Carolina has said the opposite, that they're no good. States can establish local governments. So the states as a government actually creates county lines. So every county government, the county commissioners, the sheriff's office by county in North Carolina, they are all created at the state level by state statute. So every county that's come into existence over time was given that county charter by the state government. They establish public school systems. So the feds don't make schools, with the one exception likely being military-based kind of schools and territorial schools in other protectorate kind of areas like Guam and Puerto Rico. They might have some power over that. But as far as a state, the state of North Carolina has complete control of their schools. And you might say, well, why does our lunch taste like crap now? Because of Michelle Obama. That's what I hear a lot in class. We'll talk about that in just a minute, and how the feds can still kind of get their hooks into the state exclusive areas. We'll talk about how they do in a little while. The state can conduct elections and determine qualifications of voters under the federal guidelines for elections, for presidential, congressional, and senatorial elections, the national level elections. The requirement is age 18, not a felon, and a U.S. citizen. That's it. That's the only requirements. States can have more requirements or fewer requirements so long as they do not violate the Constitution. So the state can have more requirements and can basically say, all right, you got to be 18, not a felon, and they might also say, and for our state elections, you can't have committed a misdemeanor in the last year also. That might get through. It might be declared unconstitutional, but that might get through. They can also decrease their qualifications for elections for state-run offices. So there's some movement out in the Midwest, because some of those states are very sparsely populated, that may be allowing people who are 16 years old vote for things like school board or a mayor or local level elections, because they are directly influenced, or they're more directly influenced than, let's say, a senator would be. So you can have states change their laws depending on what their desire as a state is. I think the youngest mayor ever elected was actually a 19-year-old who was elected mayor, oddly enough. But they control their local election laws. They can't control federal election. They basically run the election for the federal positions, but they can't add or subtract qualifications. They also provide for the public health, safety, and welfare in their state. So there are state-level welfare programs, things like state housing initiatives, state-run projects, state-run food programs, state-run education, and think like Head Start programs for pre-K kids. Those can be run by the state. California, Oregon, Washington State, West Coast states, some New England states have much more broad social public welfare programs than some Midwestern states or in some southern states. All right, concurrent powers. These are powers that are shared by both the federal government and the state and local governments together. Concurrent just means think like congruent. They overlap each other. They're together. First, they provide for the general welfare. So the idea of protection, safety, that really broad umbrella category of what does general welfare mean? Well, it means just about anything that you can logically infer to help the public. That can basically be general welfare. They can both collect taxes. So the states have an income tax. They have sales taxes. They have property taxes. The feds have income tax. Gas taxes are a big one. So like in this state, we have a very high gas tax, but that is at the state level. If you were to go across the Virginia border, if you probably have in your lifetime, you'll see the gas price, something just dips down. If you go from like the Mecklenburg area and you cross into Georgia, it goes real low because their state gas tax is very, very low. The state government is allowed to borrow money through bond initiatives. So the feds can borrow money, just like every now and then you hear in the news, like half our debt's owned by China, whatever, all that fun stuff. Well, that's basically selling bonds. What they're doing is they're selling bonds at interest, saying, I'm going to sell you $1 million bond, China, and in 30 years you'll get to collect $1,030,000. So that's making money over time. The idea is that they make a small amount of money, and it's guaranteed by the fact that we are a large country with a stable government. Therefore, our bond is valuable, and in 30 years it'll pay out. States can do the same thing. Now, what you see in different states is that bond and that borrowing power changes. Like North Carolina, we're pretty good with our bond rating, but Michigan, they have trouble borrowing money because Michigan's having so many issues with just depopulation. There's no industry in Michigan. The car industry's left and gone down to Mexico. And they've just been hit hard because they can't even borrow money effectively to pay for things because people have just left. And as far as buying a bond or investing money in Michigan, people don't think they'll get a return on that investment. So their bond rating's gone down, and it's just a mess in Michigan right now as far as their ability to borrow money as effectively as other states can. The state governments establish courts, but so do the feds. So the federal government, Article 3, establishes how courts are made at the federal level. There's an Article 3 in every state constitution, or it might not be Article 3, but there's a synonymous article or provision in every state constitution about how to establish new courts. And they all pretty much mimic how everything else works out, except for the fact that most states elect their judges, even at the Supreme Court level for that state. So there's like a state Supreme Court, just like there's a U.S. Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court in North Carolina and most other states is actually elected. So it's a different dynamic there. States are allowed to enforce their own laws. So like North Carolina's firework law, we have the power to enforce the laws we make. And that is this entire thing, guys. This is just the state powers that exist. There's not really much more to it. The last thing I want to talk about, however, is, we'll go back a few slides. All right. Establishing local governments and establishing a public school system. So why does the public school system, why were they able to alter our lunches? Why is the federal government able to have input on our curriculum? Why do I have to learn about X, Y, and Z for the state of North Carolina, but really I just need to know X and Y, and the feds are saying I need to know Z? Well, under our Constitution, the federal government is not allowed to just come in and say, you have to start learning Common Core, you have to learn this, that, and the other. They can't establish curriculum. However, what they can do is say, if you establish the curriculum we like, we'll give you money. And that's the carrot. They can't be a stick. The federal government cannot be a stick and smack the states for not doing what they're supposed to do. But they can give a carrot and say, we'll give you money if you do what we say. And that's the way the federal government kind of makes its way into those reserved powers, regulation of commerce. Another really good example would be drinking laws, blue laws, driving under at a certain level laws. So like if you were pulled over, or if anybody's pulled over because y'all are too young, if someone's pulled over for DUI and they blow a .08, that's the limit. That's the limit across the whole country. The reason that is the limit is because the federal government said if you don't make .08 the limit in your state, we will withhold highway funds to help fix your highways that run through there. And guess what? All the states fell in line because they did not want to lose that money. So keep that in mind as you're going through these various PowerPoints. Don't just think, okay, this power goes here, this power goes here. There's loopholes. There's ways to get around these powers, and usually that loophole relates to money incentives. So just understand that, know it for the future.